Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T, and if true crime is your jam, and like me, you enjoy delving into unsolved cases, trying to figure out who done it, please consider subscribing. Also, if you enjoy my videos, please hit that like button. The most talked about true crime case on the YouTube streets over the past month is that of Dylan Rounds, the 19-year-old who disappeared from his farm in the remote desert town of Lucin, Utah. Lucin is so small that its population in the 1990s was 4, as in 4 people. Its rough and tumble desert landscape doesn't lend itself to neighborhoods and residential living. There are many characters on the periphery of Dylan's world in Lucin, and it can be hard to keep them all straight. So I thought I'd give you a who's who in the Dylan Round case and why they factor into the mix. For those of you who don't know, Dylan Rounds is the 19-year-old farmer who was living in the remote desert town of Lucin, Utah, and running his own farm. He was helped financially in the endeavor by his paternal grandparents, who enabled Dylan to purchase 640 acres of raw land in the desert. Apparently, Dylan also had about $80,000 in cash assets and was said to have boasted about it in Montello, Nevada, a town 18 miles away from Lucin, where there's a bar, the Saddle Sore Bar, a restaurant, the Cowboy Cafe, and a few other establishments. It's a dangerous thing to boast about money like that in a town that draws criminals and ne'er-do-wells. About 30 miles from Lucin, Montello is also a small town with about 200 inhabitants. The private investigator that Dylan's grandparents hired to get answers about their grandson, a man named Jim Terry, has described Montello as an absolute shithole. Both Montello and Lucin seem to attract people who want to fly under the radar and live off the grid, including convicted felons and meth heads. So if the news of Dylan's $80,000 was well known, that could be motive for someone in need of cash to harm the 19-year-old. Note that in Montello and Lucin, some of the farm workers were known to patrol the land themselves, acting as their own law enforcement. Apparently, this type of citizens patrol is not unusual in small rural settings in the middle of nowhere, places where troubled people often like to hang out. Early on Saturday, May 28, 2022, it began to rain in Lucin. At 6:51 a.m., Dylan spoke to his grandmother over the phone and told her that he couldn't talk right at that moment because he needed to move his seed truck inside a grain shed to keep it safe from the rain. The grain shed is 5 miles away from Dylan's trailer and on a property owned by 2 other people known as SH and RI. Dylan told his grandmother that he'd call her back later in the day. Tragically, Dylan never fulfilled that promise. That would be the last time anyone in his family spoke to him. Later that day at 3:41 p.m., Dylan's phone pinged on his farm. The ping occurred somewhere within a 15.4-mile radius on the property. Dylan hasn't been seen or heard from since. It wasn't until Monday, May 30th, when Dylan's friend, J.D. Wild, called Dylan's mother, Candace Cooley, to let her know that Dylan was nowhere to be seen, that the family realized something was wrong. Candace alerted her ex-husband, Justin Rounds, and the whole family were soon on the road to Lucin. Once at Dylan's farm, the family scoured Dylan's trailer, his truck, and his land. After Dylan's boots were found haphazardly thrown on the ground, about 100 yards behind a pile of dirt near the grain shed, his parents knew with certainty that something bad had gone down. His mother said those were his only boots and that Dylan would never walk in the desert without them. It didn't help that there was a small spot on Dylan's boots that appeared to be either oil or blood. When law enforcement later tested the spot, it came back as blood, although it's still unclear who the blood belongs to or if it is even human blood. Also, no one other than the experts can say at this point if that blood drop is new to the boots or if Dylan had blood on his boots from perhaps a nosebleed some time ago. Note that the grain shed and the land on which it sits does not belong to Dylan. Its owners, again, SH and RI, live out of state. However, they'd given Dylan permission to access their land and use the grain shed. The only caveat was that Dylan would need to deal with a man who lived in a trailer on that land. Which brings us to Shady character number 1, James Brenner, also known as Jim Brenner. 58-year-old Jim Brenner was Dylan Round's closest neighbor. No one seems to have a reliable photo of James Brenner, so I will describe what we know of him. He's overweight, anywhere from 190 to 250 pounds. His height has been listed at 5 feet 1 inch, but it's not clear if that is accurate. Height is important in this case because Candace Cooley believes that whoever harmed her son moved the seat in Dylan's Ford truck forward to drive it. Dylan is 5 feet 11 inches tall and 160 pounds. Whenever his mother, who is 5 feet 1 inch tall, needed to drive it, she had to move the seat all the way forward because Dylan always had it all the way back. However, when Candace got into Dylan's truck on that Monday after he vanished, the seat was already all the way forward. The truck was also in 4-wheel drive, which set off alarm bells for the family. You see, Dylan's 4-wheel drive was broken, and he was never using his truck in 4-wheel drive. So whoever moved the seat forward and whoever put the truck in 4-wheel drive most likely was not Dylan. Jim Brenner is said to live on Social Security disability monies, although it's unclear what his disability is. Brenner was known to both Dylan Rounds and his grandparents. Dylan's mother had met Brenner, but only in passing. Occasionally, Dylan hired Jim Brenner to help out on the farm. Dylan had described Brenner to his mother as a crazy old man who lives in the desert. But Brenner did not like Dylan and may have resented the teenager being in a boss position and telling him, a 58-year-old man, what to do. But Dylan wasn't the only person Brenner had issues with. He was a well-known entity in Montello, often getting into bar fights and stirring up trouble. At some point, Brenner put up a makeshift fence with a lock at the entrance to SH and RI's property, forcing Dylan to deal with him in order to access the grain shed. The gate may have been used by Brenner as a way to have power over young Dylan. The gate definitely caused tension between Dylan and Brenner, and it may have been that Dylan had to rouse Jim Brenner on that rainy Saturday morning to get his seed truck over to the grain shed, and perhaps Brenner wasn't happy about it. Or it's possible that Dylan just drove over the flimsy makeshift gate to get to the grain shed. The front of Dylan's truck has been found to be damaged. It's interesting to note that Dylan's boots were found a mere 100 to 150 yards away from Brenner's trailer. Brenner also allegedly said at some point that he wanted to do Dylan in and bury him in a desert wash. Some are speculating that maybe Brenner made Dylan take his boots off and start running before he shot the teen. Or perhaps Brenner dragged Dylan by his boots and that's how they came off. Both scenarios are pure speculation at this point. Jim Brenner came to the authorities' attention after Dylan went missing because a friend of his, a man referred to as Don H., told the police that right after Dylan vanished, Jim Brenner asked him to safeguard 3 muzzle loaders and a .22 rifle. Don H. thought Brenner asking him to do that was suspicious. The police later arrested Jim Brenner on illegal possession of a firearm. Brenner, because of his lengthy criminal history, which includes multiple charges for assault and assault with intent to murder, cannot own firearms legally. Currently, Jim Brenner is being held in the Weber County Jail on those firearm charges, and he's been denied bail because he poses a flight risk. Some people who live in Montello have accused Jim Brenner of shooting at people who come to the remote area to visit the nearby Sun Tunnel installation. Brenner has also been accused of beating a 70-year-old man with a folded lawn chair in 2021. It sounds like Brenner is a trigger-happy man with an explosive temper, a lethal combination. Brenner is also an enemy of Kurt Wadsworth, who is a friend of Dylan's and who runs the Saddle Sore Bar in Montello. Wadsworth has been rumored to have had an intimate relationship with Dylan, although Dylan's parents adamantly deny this. A few days ago, on July 7th of 2022, the Box Elder County Sheriff's Office named Brenner a suspect in Dylan Round's disappearance. That tells us that Brenner is the number one person that law enforcement now believes harmed Dylan. Next, we have Don H. Don H. is the person who called law enforcement to report his friend Jim Brenner's strange behavior when he asked Don to safeguard several firearms after Dylan went missing. Don H. had been one of Dylan's grandfather's employees prior to working for Dylan. It's been said that Don H. was the person who introduced Dylan to Jim Brenner. Apparently, Dylan had recently fired Don H. after an argument over a washing machine, and Don H. had, like Jim Brenner, not been happy taking orders from the 19-year-old. Some say Don H. and Jim Brenner equally despised Dylan and were even sabotaging the young farmer's equipment. But still other people are saying that Dylan and Don H. parted ways amicably, and that Don H. is a good guy who would never do anything to Dylan. It's hard to know who's telling the truth, but we have to remember that Don H. called the authorities after Brenner asked him to safeguard the firearms. Note that Dylan's grandmother called Don H. on Sunday, May 29th, after not hearing back from Dylan the day before, and she asked him to go and look for Dylan. Don H. and Jim Brenner are said to have gone looking for Dylan that Sunday. Perhaps Don H., not knowing what could have happened to Dylan on that remote farm, thought it prudent to bring another man with him when he went out there that day. Some people are saying that Don H. is Dylan's grandmother's brother, but that has not been verified. The third shady character around the Dylan Rounds case is 41-year-old Chase Venstra. Chase Venstra is yet another person with an extensive criminal past who was living in Montello, Nevada, when Dylan went missing. Venstra has since been named a person of interest in Dylan's disappearance. Like Jim Brenner, Venstra is currently in jail on unrelated firearm possession charges. Venstra is to remain in custody until his next hearing on July 19th. Authorities have said that Venstra has an alibi. The controversial private eye, Jim Terry, who was hired by Dylan's grandparents and aunt to find answers in Dylan's disappearance, says that Chase Venstra was seen 3 hours away from Lucin in a Little Caesars pizza joint at the time that Dylan disappeared. I'm assuming Terry is referring to Venstra being seen on Saturday, May 28th at that Little Caesars, but he didn't say that specifically, and he didn't mention which hours Venstra was seen at the restaurant. Terry then also stated that Dylan's parents really don't know exactly when Dylan went missing. So now I'm wondering how Terry could be so sure that Chase Venstra has an alibi for the period during which Dylan went missing. Chase Venstra is the barefoot, bloody guy who flagged Dylan Rounds down on a gravel road out at mile marker 53 in the desert on Wednesday, May 25th, a few days before Dylan went missing. According to Dylan's mother, Candace, Venstra asked Dylan for a ride and to use his cell phone because his own phone had gone dead. After the incident, Dylan called his mother at work around 9:28 a.m. to tell her about his strange run-in with this man. But Dylan was not truthful, and he lied to Candace, telling her that he did not give the man a ride when he actually had. Dylan also told his mother that the man had used his cell phone to call his father and tell him that he'd been picking potatoes with his kids that morning, and now he can't find his kids or his own pickup truck. The father, according to Dylan, replied, "We've been looking for you for 3 days. We have your kids and pickup." Per Candace, Venstra's father then came and picked Chase up. It turns out that Chase Venstra's eldest son had worked for Dylan the previous summer, so it would appear that Dylan knew Chase Venstra, despite him making it sound to his mother that the bloodied man in the desert was a stranger. Venstra, who stands at 6 feet 1 inch tall, has an extensive criminal past, which includes multiple charges for cruelty to animals, speeding, violating a protective order, carrying a concealed dangerous weapon, possession of drug paraphernalia, retail theft, driving without proof of insurance, driving with expired registration, criminal trespassing, interference with an arresting officer, and then an arrest in 2016 following a 10-hour standoff with police. In 2016, the police spotted Chase Venstra out and about and knew that he was wanted on several outstanding warrants, including charges for DV, assault, and stalking. Once Venstra realized he was about to be apprehended, he fled into a house and hid in the attic. There ensued a 10-hour standoff. Venstra is clearly a serial offender and a very troubled person. But let's get back now to 2022. On June 12th of 2022, the Davis County Sheriff's Office and Box Elder County Sheriff's Office served a warrant on Chase Venstra's residence in conjunction with a homicide investigation. The complaint does not say which homicide was being investigated. Could the police have been referring to Dylan Rounds' case? Possibly, although Dylan's body has yet to be found. The complaint states that the 6 deputies sent out to search Venstra's house found 2 firearms in his possession. As a convicted felon, Venstra, like Brenner, is not allowed to possess firearms, and that's why he was arrested. Chase Venstra is also the person Kurt Wadsworth told Dylan's parents may be holding Dylan captive. Kurt Wadsworth claimed that a psychic told him this information. Obviously, the police did not find Dylan at Venstra's motorhome when they went out to check it out. Some believe that Venstra may have assisted Jim Brenner in some way when it comes to Dylan Rounds' disappearance, perhaps helping him dump and or hide the body. Venstra allegedly was also the person in Montello who was telling people that Kurt Wadsworth was gay. Note that after Dylan vanished, Chase Venstra was calling into the police repeatedly, wanting to clear his name. One has to wonder if a guy who committed a crime would do such a thing, call the police repeatedly. Which brings us now to Kurt Wadsworth. 60-year-old Kurt Wadsworth lives in Montello, Nevada, and runs the Saddle Sore Bar. He's the father of 8 children from whom he's said to be estranged. He's also estranged from his wife. Wadsworth has family members with major criminal backgrounds. Kurt Kurt Wadsworth describes himself as Dylan Round's friend. According to Kurt, he would often help Dylan out on his farm, sometimes backhoeing for the young farmer whose work ethic he admired. Wadsworth opens the Saddle Sore Bar on a non-regular schedule, maybe only once a week, maybe only once every other week. Many believe there's some shady business going on with this bar, because what kind of bar can afford to only be open once in a while? Could the Saddle Sore Bar be the front for some other illegal activity, perhaps money laundering or drug trafficking? Possibly. However, that's pure speculation. Kurt often allowed Dylan to stay in a mobile home that he keeps behind the Saddle Sore. On nights when Dylan was in Montello, he would sometimes sleep in Wadsworth's mobile home, where he could enjoy a hot shower. Dylan's own trailer in Lucin does not have running water. Kurt said that Dylan often used his pizza oven in the Saddle Sore Bar to bake frozen pizzas for dinner. According to Wadsworth, Dylan sometimes preferred to stay in Montello rather than drive back to Lucin in the darkness of night. Remember, this area is in the remote desert. There aren't streetlights out there, and when the sun goes down, it's pure darkness. I've heard that Wadsworth himself may have lived in the Saddle Sore Bar, but that's not been verified. Wadsworth made it sound like he simply parks his mobile home out back, but that he doesn't actually live in it. Some people, including Chase Venstra and that PI, Jim Terry, have alleged that Kurt was more than a friend to Dylan, as in he and Dylan may have had an intimate relationship. However, Dylan's parents adamantly deny this and are angered that such rumors may distract from Dylan's case. In my opinion, if Kurt was having a relationship with Dylan, that would be something that law enforcement should know about and check out. I will also say that listening to Kurt Wadsworth talk about Dylan makes it seem like he genuinely cared for the 19-year-old. Kurt Wadsworth is also the guy who called Dylan's parents to say that another man named Chase Venstra was holding Dylan captive. When Dylan's parents and law enforcement went to Venstra's residence, they didn't find Dylan. It's highly suspicious that Kurt Wadsworth shared this bizarre story of a kidnapping. Note that no one has contacted Dylan's family for a ransom, so the kidnapping story is likely not true. Next, we have 60-year-old Troy Wadsworth, who also lives in Montello, Nevada. He's Kurt's brother, and I believe he runs the Cowboy Saloon and Cafe, the only restaurant in Montello. Troy has been accused of stalking his ex-girlfriend and breaking into her residence. Some say that Troy was also charged with some SA crimes, but it may be that people are confusing Troy with a third Wadsworth brother. Note that Troy was seen with scratches on his arms after Dylan's disappearance, but his brother Kurt says that those scratches are from falling off a three-wheeler. There is yet another brother in the Wadsworth family. That brother is a registered SO in both Utah and Idaho. It appears he was soliciting a minor over the internet, and it appears that he did this multiple times. So it's safe to say that the third Wadsworth brother is a very troubled man. So those are the people whose names have come up most in Dylan Round's disappearance. Now, let me also share an update on the investigation. It appears that the FBI is concentrating their efforts around the grain shed where Dylan's boots were found. It's been said that something large was trucked off that property for analysis. Could that be Dylan's seed truck? Possibly. I've also heard that there's another person of interest in the case who's being left unnamed at this point for his or her own protection. Also, it's been said that watermelon rinds and a can of Coke were found in Dylan's truck. Apparently, watermelon was one of Dylan's favorite snacks, but the 19-year-old preferred Pepsi over Coke. So were those items Dylan's, or did someone else enjoy these snacks while driving Dylan's truck? There's a $100,000 reward for information leading to Dylan. Anyone with knowledge regarding the disappearance of Dylan Rounds should call the Box Elder County Sheriff's Office. Dispatch non-emergency phone numbers are 435-723-5227, 435-734-3894, and 435-257-3131. You can also send private messages through the Box Elder County Sheriff's Office's Facebook page. Until the next time on Bed Crime Stories. Now do me a favor, smash that like button.